Can you do it or no?
Yep, I just started recording. I just have another call at 2:30 for a health coaching session. So I may just have to let them pick another time.
Yeah, because I don't want you to pop off and then.
Yep, no, I'll just keep recording and I'll tell her I have a conflict, so should be good.
Well, now we know that you have to be the organizer to do that.
Can you share, can you make Jamie one of the organizers? Is it too late now? Probably too late now.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that works.
Hopefully I'll be able to share my screen. Should we practice that real quick?
Oh yeah, you should be good, but you can go ahead and try. Go ahead.
Okay. Oh yeah, I think we're good. Can you guys see it?
Looks good.
Okay, and I'll do it as a slideshow once they all come on.
And we still see you, Alissa, so you're good too with that.
I'm just leave it up.
Alrighty, well, it's 2 now, but we will wait a couple more minutes for some people to pop in here.
So people are going to be potentially tuning in from other parts of the other.
Trying to admit people.
Hi, Thais. And just a reminder, you guys, if you do, just please please mute your mics as you guys are joining. Make sure your mics are off. We can go through and mute you by hand if we need to. But just as a lovely little courtesy, we'll get started in probably 2 more minutes.
Yep. And that mute all button is dangerously close to admitting people in, so hopefully I don't mute you, Alissa.
Okay.
At some point.
I'll hopefully be able to unmute myself if that happens. That would not be fun.
I'll keep an eye on it. We have about 50, a little over 50 people signed up for this, so we're about halfway. So we'll wait maybe 2 more minutes.
Sounds good. Hey, great turnout.
Yeah.
I think having the virtual option really does
Great.
allow more people to participate and people from other campuses and things like that. So
It'll be interesting to see if we can combine this, in the future, if we're going to do all virtual or maybe a mix of both, 2 separate things.
Yeah, I know. We gotta all figure out the new normal. There's some sort of hybrid. Yeah. It'd be fun to come in person again, I think.
Yeah.
And presentation live, but then also maybe be recording it and
yeah, like that for sure. Alrighty, well, we're gonna go ahead and get started, everyone. So we've got about half the participants in here, but I'll keep admitting people. But like Amy said, if y'all don't mind muting yourselves, and then we'll just keep Alissa at the forefront, but I will let you introduce yourself, Alissa, and take it away.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks everyone for tuning in today and spending part of your day learning about how nutrition can impact your running. My name is Alissa Palladino. I am a registered dietitian. with Corporate Health Unlimited, which runs the fitness center at the Cox campuses. Like many of you, I'm still working from home. So as you see, I've got my kitchen as my backdrop, which I think is appropriate given that we're going to be talking about food. And I know that a lot of you are probably training for this upcoming virtual 5K. Maybe some of you have other races that are coming up or other forms of exercise that you like to engage in. So it's, always a good idea to kind of understand some nutrition basics and then how our food choices can impact our training, our performance, our recovery, our energy, and all that good stuff. As we go through the presentation, I will kind of pause there's a few different section breaks, and I'll pause to kind of see if anyone has any questions. And if it's something that we can address, that's relevant for the whole group, we'll certainly do that. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end also. Okay. Can you guys also see me and hear me, but also see my slides?
Yep, we can see
Okay.
you.
Yes.
Slides.
All right, just confirming. Okay, so here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk about, there's going to be some, nutrition basics to get started. So we'll talk about macronutrients and their food sources. We'll share some general healthy eating guidelines, and then we'll get into running specific fueling. So pre, during, and post. Sometimes the guidelines around exercise, nutrition seem a little bit opposite from general healthy eating guidelines, and that is actually true. We'll get into hydration. We'll talk a bit about weight management, and then finish up with some additional nutrition considerations for runners. All right, so let's cover the basics. Our macronutrients. These are our three main nutrients that provide energy or calories. We need them in larger amounts, so hence the term macro, and there's three types: carbohydrates, protein, and fat. All of them are essential, meaning we must obtain them from our diet. We can't make them in our bodies. And we require a balance of all three of them each day to function optimally and really thrive. So carbohydrates are important for quick, easy energy. This is going to be especially important when we get into fueling for exercise. But even for, those of us when we're just working and using our brains during the day, carbohydrates are actually the preferred fuel source for our brains, and definitely the preferred fuel source for working muscles during exercise, particularly at higher intensities and longer durations. Eating carbohydrates does directly impact our blood glucose. So we eat a carbohydrate, our blood glucose rises. Not necessarily a bad thing. That's actually just how all the cells in our body get energy. But for overall health, we do know that not all carbohydrates affect us equally, right? So we want to focus on more of our fiber-rich carbohydrates for heart health, and limit some of our less nutritious forms of carbohydrates. So sweetened beverages, pastries, sugar, candy, cookies, refined grains, so sort of like our white flour products. Some excellent carbohydrate food sources that are really nutritious and packed with energy, but also nutrients would be our whole grains, which includes brown rice, quinoa, farro, barley, and bulgur, just to name a few. Many of which are naturally gluten-free, if that's something you need to adhere to. Also, our whole grain bread, wraps, and pitas. Our pasta, especially our whole wheat pasta or our bean-based pasta. All fruit, bananas, apples, berries, great source of carbohydrates. Starchy vegetables like potatoes, peas, and corn. Beans, lentils, and legumes. So we often think about these guys as our plant-based protein sources, but they're also an excellent source of carbohydrates. Oatmeal and cereal. All right. So our next macronutrient is protein, and many people think of protein, they think about muscle, right? They think about meat, and both those things are true, right? So as far as the role that protein plays in our body, it is essential for tissue growth and repair, helping us maintain our lean muscle, promotes recovery after exercise, and it helps increase our satiety and helps us manage hunger. So we really do want to, really focus on getting enough protein, really ideally spreading it evenly throughout the day, having a good protein source at all of our meals and snacks, in order to really optimize our muscle synthesis and recovery, but also really help best, keep our hunger at bay and help keep us focused throughout the day. For heart health, again, kind of like the fiber-rich carbohydrates, our leaner animal-based sources of protein and our plant-based sources of protein are going to be better for our hearts and our cholesterol levels. And so some good food sources here would be our red meat, including beef and pork, poultry, which includes chicken and turkey, fish and seafood, eggs and egg whites, dairy, so like our milk, yogurt, and cheese, our beans, lentils, and legumes, so those are our plant-based sources, as well as soy, which includes tofu and tempeh, and then our nuts and seeds also have some protein in them. Our final macronutrient is fat. And before I kind of go through the role that dietary fat, plays, we want to make a distinction here between the fat that's found in foods and the fat that's found in our body. They are two distinct things, and eating foods with fat doesn't like directly translate into us gaining body fat. We can gain body fat by having an excess of calories in from any of the three macronutrients, so carbs, fat, or protein. We do need some level of body fat for health, for our hormones. It's a stored fuel source. It provides protection for our organs. It's an insulation. It helps us maintain our temperature. So yeah, dietary fat also plays some important roles, really not really when it comes to sports nutrition. So that protein and carbohydrates are going to be kind of come back on the scene and be relevant when we talk about fueling for exercise, fueling for running. Dietary fat is something we do want to incorporate though in our main meals for that balance, help us feel more satisfied for longer, increase nutrient absorption. So certain vitamins are actually fat soluble. So vitamins A, D, and K are going to be better absorbed if we eat those foods with a fat source. So if we add some olive oil to like our leafy green salad. And then for flavor, definitely I would say that like a sauteed vegetable or grain is going to be a lot more delicious than just like steamed, right? Or baked or like raw, right? So a little bit of fat adds flavor to our meals. Again, for heart health, we want to focus on unsaturated, so mainly plant-based sources of fat, and have some examples on the next page, while limiting our saturated fat and our trans fat, which can increase our bad cholesterol levels if we consume too much. So some of our healthy fat sources that we want to have with our meals and our snacks would include nuts, nut butters, our seeds, like our chia, flax, pumpkin, and sunflower seeds, avocado. A lot of people know that's a great healthy fat source, olives and olive oil, fatty fish. So this is kind of an exception to the plant-animal rule. Most of the time, our plant-based fats are healthier for our hearts, but fatty fish like salmon, tuna, and mackerel contain omega-3s, which are really great for our heart and great for inflammation. And then I put cheese and other full-fat dairy products here on this list because they do contain fat, but they also contain protein and calcium and vitamin D and other important nutrients, potassium as well. So I'd count them as kind of like a good fat to have incorporate if it's something you like. All right, so finally, we've got our macros, carbs, fats, and proteins that give us energy. We also need micronutrients. So micronutrients are vitamins and minerals. We need them in much, much smaller amounts than our macros, but we do need them. They are essential. We must get them from our diet. They don't provide energy or calories, but they are involved in the process by which our body breaks down the energy from macronutrients. So, it all kind of comes together. And our micronutrients, so our vitamins A, our calcium, our potassium, they play essential roles in so many different aspects of our health, in how we produce energy and our metabolism, in our exercise performance and recovery, right? So that's going to be the focus of this topic, this presentation today. Really, for the most part, if you're eating a balanced diet, and we'll get to that in the next section, you're probably not going to end up with a deficiency in any given micronutrient. So really the best way to get all your macros is to eat a variety of foods from each of the food groups. However, if you are following a restrictive diet for whatever reason, health, personal preferences, there may be certain micronutrients that you need to supplement. On a strict vegan diet, for example, it's pretty difficult to get enough B12, sometimes iron, sometimes calcium if you're avoiding dairy. So, there might be some cases, individual cases where we would want to supplement. All right. So in our next section, we'll go through some general healthy eating guidelines, including what, when, and how much. But does anyone have any questions so far about macronutrients or micronutrients or anything I shared? All right, well, we will have many more chances throughout the presentation, so save up your questions if you got them. We'll also be circling back to at least carbohydrates and protein. All right, so some general healthy eating guidelines. Building balanced meals starts on your plate, okay? So I really like to educate on the balanced plate approach because it works in any setting. Literally, you can go into any restaurant, navigate any menu, any dinner party, apply this plate method concept and build a balanced meal. And it's customizable for really like any dietary preferences you could want or have, right? So again, if you prefer to eat a vegan diet, you can still build a balanced plate. If you prefer to be a pescatarian, only have, fish and seafood as your protein source, you can still build a balanced plate. The exact proportions and the portions are going to depend on your unique needs and goals, because everybody's different, right? Everybody's a different size, a different activity level, has different goals as far as gaining weight, losing weight. But this is a template that, again, you can customize and you can use to navigate food forever. So let's go through the components, the building blocks of a balanced meal. Okay, so first we've got our veggies. Not surprising to hear a dietitian recommending veggies. They're going to add volume, they're going to add dietary fiber, they're going to give you those micronutrients that we talked about, and they're going to give you those antioxidants, which work on a cellular level to prevent inflammation and protect against disease, promote recovery from exercise as well. Then we want to have a good source of complex carbohydrates. Again, that's going to be the energy to fuel our body and our brain. We want to have a lean protein source, so that's going to help us stay satisfied, manage our hunger, and promote muscle recovery and muscle building in some cases. And then a healthy fat source for satiety, for our hormones, for nutrient absorption, for flavor. So we want to have something from each of these categories, and then we have a balanced meal that's going to optimize our health, optimize our performance, keep us satisfied. And again, you can incorporate your favorite foods into this template. Breakfast, little bit different. Still want to have carbs, proteins, fat, your macros. If you can get some veggies in, that's a bonus, right? So if you can throw some spinach or peppers into your omelet, if you're making a smoothie and you want to add some kale, bonus for getting in veggies at breakfast. Or maybe you're someone who likes to eat leftovers for breakfast, then cool, awesome. And then with your snacks. So with your snacks, and again, snacks really do play an important role in keeping you satisfied and energized throughout the day. Think about pairing some sort of complex carbohydrate with either a lean protein or a healthy fat. So I call this like a power pair. Instead of just having one food group, you have two, and that way you're going to get a more balanced blood sugar and you're going to be more energized and satisfied for longer. Those are just very general and vague. So let's take a look at some examples here. And because this is being recorded, and actually I usually do send out my slides ahead of time, I'm not going to go through and read each of these examples off, but you'll have them to refer back to. And basically the key is, here are some food examples of this template, right? So each of these examples here has a carbohydrate, a protein, and a fat. Let's just kind of go through the first example. Eggs, that's your protein and a little bit of fat, cooked any style. With your whole grain toast or potatoes. You're going to get protein and fat from the eggs. You're going to get carbohydrates from the whole grain toast or potatoes. Again, if you want to throw some veggies in those eggs, bonus points for more nutrition. And here's another example kind of later. Lower down, I gave you a smoothie, right? So Greek yogurt or protein powder would be your protein. You could even use silken tofu there. Frozen fruit would be your carbohydrate. The milk of choice would either just be a liquid or potentially it would add some more protein. The greens would be your bonus veggies, and then the nut butter or the seeds would be your healthy fat. So lots of different ways to kind of put that template into practice. Same thing for lunch. It doesn't have to be complicated. Even just a sandwich can fit the bill, right? So your deli meat, your turkey, your ham, your roast beef would be your protein, maybe some canned tuna on a whole grain bread or sub or wrap. That's going to be your carbohydrate. The lettuce and tomato and maybe any other vegetables you want to add would be your veggies. And then you can add some cheese or hummus or guacamole as your fat. So really, like, even just something as basic as a sandwich, if you're conscientious about what goes into it, can fit that balanced meal template. For dinner, I always like to talk about the one sheet pan meal. For those of you who haven't tried it yet, it's kind of a game changer. You can put all the components of your balanced meal on one sheet pan, minimal cleanup, everything you need. So, your maybe your salmon or your chicken as your protein, maybe your Brussels sprouts or your asparagus as your veggie, some kind of sweet potato, red potato, white potato as your carb, coat it with olive oil, any other kind of seasonings you want, roast it in the oven, and you've got a full meal ready to go. You can feed your whole family, or you can feed yourself for the whole week if you're meal prepping. And some balanced snack ideas. So kind of going back to that idea of power pairing. We want to have a carbohydrate with some kind of fat or some kind of protein, right? So if we do fruit, that's giving us carbs, but if we pair it with almond butter, then we're going to get some protein and fat. If we have Greek yogurt, that's going to give us some protein. If we pair it with berries, we're going to also get some carbs, or granola, we're going to get some carbs and some fat there. So lots of different examples there. Okay, so those are ideas. That's the what of general healthy eating. Then we want to talk about the when and the how much. So just to kind of mention with timing, I said this already when I mentioned snacks. When we eat really is nearly as important as what we eat. We don't want to be going long stretches of time without eating. There is no one size fits all timing strategy. Some people prefer to have breakfast, lunch, snack, dinner. Some people prefer to eat small meals every 3 hours. But we don't want to go much longer than 4. Our blood sugar is going to start to dip. Our energy levels are going to start to dip. We're going to start getting really hungry, maybe even hangry. And from that place, it's a lot more tricky to make a food choice that supports our goals. We're much more likely to just grab something out of convenience, or even kind of give into an impulse choice. So if we really want to prioritize nutrition and prioritize healthy eating, we want to eat on a consistent basis and consider the time of our exercise. So we want to make sure we're going into our workouts fueled and that we have a recovery meal or snack afterwards. So we want to plan our meals and snacks around our exercise, or at least consider the timing of our exercise when we plan our day of eating. Because we also don't want to be super full, right? When we go out for a run, we don't want to have just had like a giant lunch and then try to go for a run. That's not fun either. Portion sizes. Okay, so the final piece of general healthy eating guidelines, if you will, is how much we're eating at any given time. And again, I can't be prescriptive here because everybody's coming, to the table, no pun intended, with different needs and different goals. But we do all want to be aware of how much we're eating because that affects the nutrition we're getting. So there is a difference between a serving and a portion. And the serving is just what is listed on the label for consumer education. And so whatever nutrition information is on that represents what you're getting if you have one serving of that food. It doesn't mean you have to eat one serving of that food. Maybe in this case, instead of 2/3 of a cup, you decide to have 1/3 of a cup, or maybe you decide to have a full cup, right? All that means is that you're getting less or more of all the nutrition that's listed on the label. And there might be many reasons why you have less or more, right? It could be your hunger, it could be what you need to fuel specifically for a workout that you have coming up, or for a goal such as weight loss or weight gain, right? So again, you don't have to always follow the serving sizes, but you do want to be aware of what you serve yourself, what your portions are. And if you find yourself not without a measuring cup or measuring spoon handy, or without a food scale handy, or you just don't want to go there because it feels a little bit like compulsive to be weighing and measuring your food, which it can get to that point for certain people, use your hand to estimate. So this is like literally one of my favorite tools because you always have your hand on you, right? So the palm is a good way to kind of gauge a 3 to 4 ounce protein portion. It's like your chicken or your salmon or your tofu. If you wanted more than that, if you maybe wanted more like a 6 ounce protein portion, because again, some people might need more, then you would go with like your full hand. The full fist is about the size of a cup. So that's a great tool for maybe estimating a cup worth of pasta or rice, or a medium-sized piece of fruit, or a cup of grapes. Then the front of the fist is a 1/2 cup. So that might be like your dry oats, or that might be it might be rice, or it might be pasta if you're trying to have a smaller portion of carbohydrate. It might be 1/2 cup of nuts or something like that. 1/2 cup of ice cream. And then your thumb is going to be about a tablespoon. So this is really great portion size for like peanut butter, almond butter, even sometimes like seeds, if you're adding them onto a salad, like sunflower seeds. And then the tip of your pointer finger would be about a teaspoon. So maybe for some of your less healthy fats that you want to sort of limit, but you want to have a little bit of them, like your butter or something, you could use that teaspoon. Or maybe you're adding chia seeds to overnight oats and you just want a teaspoon. So yeah, the tip of your finger for that. So I think that's really helpful. You can also sort of reference back some common household objects. Some of these are a little bit outdated, but like a 1 cup's about a baseball size, a light bulb's about 1/2 cup. A golf ball would be about 1 ounce or 2 tablespoons. A poker chip would be 1 tablespoon. Cassette tape, I don't really think that that's relevant for most people anymore, but that's about the size. That's what 1 serving of bread should look like, although most bread now is really double that. But you get there. Okay, so what build a balanced plate with veggies, protein, carbs, and fat. Time your meals consistently throughout the day. Think about your portion sizes. Any questions before we dive now into applying some of that earlier knowledge we talked about into specifically nutrition for running?
I don't think any questions so far. Can you even see the chat, Alyssa? Just really quick.
I can't. I
Okay.
can't the way I have it with my screen shared
No
now.
worries.
I can't even see myself. All I see is my slides.
Okay, I'll keep an eye on it, but I think we're
Okay,
good.
perfect. I appreciate that. Good. All right. So now we'll get into fueling for running. And I think I always like to do a little bit of background on our basic macronutrients. Otherwise, this section makes no sense. But it's also really important to understand that our general healthy eating guidelines, like our fiber-rich carbohydrates, right, are almost like they don't always apply when we're talking specifically about training and performance and exercise. Sometimes it's almost like the opposite. So, you know, I'll kind of go through it as we talk. I'll kind of point out where the differences lie as we talk. But just kind of want to put that out there at the start that sometimes, you know, people hear sport-specific fueling recommendation, it feels really off and like opposite of what they're used to hearing about nutrition for health, and that's correct. It is literally the opposite in some cases. So when we're thinking about fueling for running, the first thing to understand is how carbohydrates work in the body. That's why I started with that. But basically, we eat a carbohydrate, right? Whether it's a piece of fruit, a piece of bread, pasta, potato, it gets broken down into sugar. So we digest it, we absorb it, our blood sugar or blood glucose rises. Then that glucose or that sugar travels to the cells in our bodies, including our muscles and our brain, and those muscles in our brain use that sugar, that glucose, for energy immediately, or as quickly as we can digest and absorb it, right? So it's going to give us that immediate fuel, and then the extra glucose or sugar that we consume or carbohydrate that we consume will be stored as glycogen. So basically like stored energy in our muscles, in our liver for when we need it later on, which also plays a role in exercise. But basically, carbs are giving us energy for running and for thinking. Okay, keep that in mind. All right. So yes, what we need, why we need carbs as runners, right? It's going to give us energy, like I just explained. It's going to improve our endurance. Okay, so if we're running for 5 minutes, fine. Anyone can run for 5 minutes or can work towards running for 5 minutes, even in a totally fasted state. But if we're trying to run for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, we need to increase our endurance through training, but we also need the fuel to keep going, fuel to burn. Those muscles need energy to keep running, right? Delays our fatigue. So I know we're training for a 5K here, not a marathon, but anyone who's at all familiar with marathon running or distance running knows that there's something called hitting the wall, where your body literally just runs out of fuel. And as trained as you are, you don't have any fuel to burn. You can't keep running. So we want to delay that by consuming carbohydrates or making sure we have carbohydrates in our system when we head out to run. It also helps spare our muscle protein, right? So our muscles are made of protein. If we are going out for a run and we're totally fasted and we maybe don't have enough carbohydrates stored in our muscle or our liver as glycogen, we could potentially start tapping into our muscle for energy. We don't want to do that. We want to maintain, always want to maintain as much of our lean muscle as possible for our metabolism, for our health, for just functioning. So making sure you're consuming carbohydrates while running distances is important for that. Helping maintain our blood glucose. So we know we eat a carbohydrate, it turns to glucose in our blood. That's actually a good thing. We really do need, we don't want to have high blood glucose, right? Diabetes, but we do actually need some level of glucose traveling through our blood to fuel our muscles, to fuel our brain. Because hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, that's no fun either. That can be really dangerous. And anyone on this call who's ever experienced that can vouch. It's not a fun feeling. You feel like I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Maybe that wasn't for me. But the point is, we don't want to have high blood glucose. We don't want to have low blood glucose either, because that can be dangerous. And it can happen when we're running without enough carbohydrates. We run out of carbohydrates. Finally, carbohydrates are the only fuel for high intensity exercise. So anaerobic exercise, if we're going all out, if we're sprinting, we're using carbs as fuel. Fat can't be used as fuel at that high intensity. So we're not actually getting, if we're trying to do speed work, if we're trying to do HIIT style exercise, we're actually not working to our potential in the absence of carbohydrates. We're not burning fat for fuel when we're going all out. So yeah, if you're expecting to, crush your 5K, you definitely want to fuel your body beforehand. So let's go through before and after, and I'll mention during, even though with a 5K, really fueling during exercise comes into play when you're exercising for 60 minutes or longer. So with a 5K, you're probably not getting into that area where you need to fuel on the run, but some of you might be also training for a race of a longer distance. Maybe you're doing back-to-back workouts, where you are ending up exercising for more than an hour. Maybe this race inspires you to then train for a 10K or half marathon. So I will kind of go through it. But first, let's talk about what to eat before. All right. So we've spoken this to death at this point. Carbs are the preferred fuel for exercise. Okay. We break down carbs into sugar, usable energy. But how quickly that transition occurs, so how quickly the carbs we eat turns into glucose or energy in our blood, depends on what else we're eating it with. So when we're eating carbs with fiber and we're pairing that with protein and fat, that breakdown is going to happen slower, right? We're not going to get immediate energy, which when we think back to a balanced meal, it's the opposite, right? We want fiber, protein, and fat with our carbs so that we have more sustained energy. But that is not the goal right before a workout. Right before a workout, the simpler, the better, right? We actually want to limit fiber. We want to limit fat. We want to go moderate with the protein so that we can have quicker, more readily available fuel for our run. So this is where we kind of go the opposite of general healthy eating. We don't want our high fiber carbs. We don't want to pair them with too much protein or fat. We want our simple carbs, quick to digest, quick to give us energy. Plus, if anyone's ever tried to run after a high fiber meal, you might find yourself gassy, bloated. You might have some GI distress. You might even end up with, the trots. So we want to go with a carb-rich, low fiber, low fat, moderate protein meal or snack, depending on the timing and your individual tolerance. So if you're trying to run first thing in the morning, you're definitely just going to have something super simple, just carbs. If you've got, 2 hours or so, then you can go a little bit more complex with a carb, maybe pair it with some protein. And this only really comes into play when you're trying to go out for a run and you haven't eaten in a while, which is always the case first thing in the morning. It might be something if you're trying to run after work and you haven't eaten since lunch, you really will want to think about some sort of mid-afternoon pre-workout, pre-run snack. And if you find that it's really hard to stomach solid food right before a workout, you can go liquid or you can do something super simple. And I'll give you some examples on the next slide. Okay, so it's first thing in the morning or it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you haven't eaten since lunch, you need a carb boost. Try a banana. A banana is one of my go-to fruits. It's easy to digest. The riper it is, the more of it is sugar, so quick fuel. A lot of people do really well with a banana right before a run, and it's got potassium, so that's actually an electrolyte, so that's a good thing too for muscle cramps. But any fruit works. Oatmeal, great option there. Dry cereal, so maybe something simple like Cheerios or Chex. I would not do like a high fiber cereal right before a run. A slice of toast, an English muffin, maybe half a bagel, depending on the length of your run. Certainly a full bagel if you're doing a distance run. Pretzels, graham crackers, saltines. Again, these aren't necessarily foods that are high in fiber or high in, a lot of nutrition. So you're kind of surprised why I'd be recommending them. Again, performance nutrition is different from general healthy eating. Okay. A grain-based granola bar or an energy bar such as Cliff. We don't want a protein bar here. We don't want a high fiber like Quest bar here. I don't know if you guys can see me, but I've got my little Quest bar here. This is one of my favorite high protein, high fiber foods. We don't want that right before a run. We really do want more of a carb-rich option. Maybe a frozen waffle, maybe a fig bar or a fruit leather. Got my little fruit leather here. I don't know if you guys can see. So dried fruit. So like raisins or dates or mango or apricots, that's a great way to get the energy, the carbs from fruit, but with less volume, which so really easy on the stomach. If you're about to go running, here's the little apricots. You want to have less volume in your stomach so it's more comfortable to run. Same thing with applesauce or really any kind of pureed fruit. Again, you're getting a more easy to digest version of a fruit with still all the carbs that you need. And then your specialty sports products. So I brought some of my little gels or my shot blocks, my gels, little energy chews. This is like kind of like candy. It's really just like different forms of sugar. But we know that right before exercise, that's actually what we need. And then you can go with the liquid options. So like a Powerade juice, you want to go with a regular Powerade if you're looking for carbs. There's nothing wrong with your zero, Gatorade Zero, Powerade Zero. You're just getting electrolytes and water. But what we're trying to do here is give ourselves some carbs, give ourselves some sugar. So that's when you would want to have the regular Powerade or the regular Gatorade. Okay.
Alyssa, there's one question in here.
Go for it. Yeah, great.
What's the typical rule of carb food consumption if your runs are typically early in the morning at 4 or 5 a.m.?
Ooh, yeah, that's tricky. Well, you definitely want to make sure you have carbs in your dinner meal. So you don't want your dinner meal to just be like protein and vegetables. You want to make sure you have rice or potatoes or pasta or something to like have some stored fuel as glycogen in your muscles. And then I would try to get in a minimum of 30 grams of carbs in that pre-workout snack. So in your case, like if you can train your stomach to have something really early and then go running. In your case, I would probably start with something like the applesauce and kind of just get used to that. And then maybe kind of, if that doesn't do it for you, trying like a packet of goo, which is about 25 grams of carbs. Again, you can work up to it. You can start with just a few sips of it and kind of work up to the full thing. And also, I should say this too, it depends on the length of your run. So and your kind of fitness level. So, if you are going out at a really easy pace for like 30 minutes or less, and you've had carbohydrates in your dinner meal, you're going to get through your run without fueling. But if you're really trying to like optimize your training, prevent that muscle breakdown, have a good workout, or go any longer than like 45 minutes, I would really make an effort to have at least one serving of one of these options. So yeah, like a serving of applesauce, a serving of a sports product, a fruit leather, something that's going to give you about 30 grams of carbs.
And then another question just popped in. Is there a general amount of carbs required or an amount to avoid as it is too much?
Yeah. So it's the typical recommendation is based on body weight. The 30 grams is sort of a nice minimum amount in the 1 hour kind of before you head out. But generally, we would recommend, and again, this kind of is a huge spectrum, but I would say try to getting a minimum of 1 gram of 1 gram of carb per kilogram of body weight. So when your body weight is about half, your kilograms of body weight is about half your pounds. So say you weigh 150 pounds, you're about 75 kilograms. Ideally, your pre-run snack or meal is going to give you 75 grams of carbs at a minimum, which could be like, if it's breakfast, that could be like a cup of oats with some fruit and milk. It could be a banana on 2 slices of toast. It could be like 2 toaster waffles with some jelly and some yogurt. So yeah, I mean, a minimum of 1 gram of carbs is ideal. But again, you kind of have to work up to that. 1 gram of carbs per kilogram, but you have to work up to that because I think a lot of people aren't used to running with that much in their system. And you have to leave yourself some more time. If you're really going to hit that, you're going to leave yourself like 2 hours or more. If it's that 1 hour mark, just try to get in 30 grams of anything with carbs.
And I think that's it for now.
Okay. And this really does depend like on your distance too, because if we were talking about marathon training, the 1 gram is a minimum. Really, we could be talking about 1 to 4 grams of carbs per kilogram, which I know surprises a lot of people. But if you're really trying to optimize your energy and optimize your training and you're doing a longer distance, you can certainly go up on that. But I think like just to get started, it's just kind of rethinking this idea of fasted exercise and recognizing that carbs are friends when it comes to performance. So making sure that like the last meal you had before your run has a carbohydrate source in it, and that, you know, if not, or it's been several hours, topping it off with one serving of some sort of carb-rich food from this list. The grams are important, don't get me wrong, but just kind of reorienting to think about carbs as a fuel source and making sure you're doing that is kind of the first step. I think you'll notice a big difference. Okay. And this again, if you're planning to start training for a 10K or half marathon or a marathon where you're doing, you know, half an hour of running and then you're going to lift weights right afterwards for an hour, basically anytime we're doing endurance exercise for longer than an hour, we want to refuel during it. So the recommendation would be a minimum of 30 grams of carbs per hour, all the way up to 60 grams of carbs per hour. Again, not super relevant with the 5K, but just some food for thought for those of you who are going to take your training further. For reference, one serving of most sports products, so like one gel, one serving of Shot Blocks is about 25 grams of carbs. So if you're doing one serving of that every hour, plus some of your hydration is coming from a carb-rich beverage and not just water, you can easily hit that 30 grams per hour. So really what is in these sports products is sugar. So if you prefer to have Twizzlers on the run or Swedish fish on the run or dried fruit on the run, that's fine. That's still giving you the carbs or the sugar you need. Sometimes runners like to take out pretzels or crackers. Food can certainly provide carbs. It's just not as easy to carry with you on the run. Okay, but again, I know that's not super relevant for the 5K, so we'll skip right ahead to post-run nutrition. So those of you who have been, you know, working with the fitness center have probably heard that, you know, how we refuel our bodies after exercise is really vital to recovery and can help us manage our hunger levels later on. Sometimes we don't feel hungry right after exercise, but if we don't refuel, then a few hours later we're hit with it and we just are like a bottomless pit, right? So it's really a good idea within an hour of finishing your workout, whether it's a run or a lifting session, to try to refuel. And that meal or snack should include carbohydrates to replenish that stored energy or glycogen, protein to actually start repairing the micro tears to your muscles, and then fluids, which we'll discuss in the next section. How much, again, this so depends on so many factors, like how long your workout was, what you had before, what your goals are, what kind of workout you did, and yeah, your individual body size. But trying to get in after a run immediately at least 10 grams of protein, maybe up to 15, and then some kind of carbohydrate as well would be really helpful. And so I don't always think that, I think it's important to consider that as we add exercise, we don't necessarily want or need to be adding eating occasions. So like if you're having 3 meals and a snack, plus now you're adding a pre-workout and a post-workout fuel, you may end up taking in more food than you need. So instead, I'd kind of think about your whole day and plan your workouts or plan your meals and snacks around your workouts, your runs, so that like your whatever your post-workout meal or snack is giving you what you need. Whatever your pre-workout meal or snack is giving you what you need, if that makes sense. So like if you work out first thing in the morning, for example, it's a good idea to, you know, have something on this list for your carbohydrate, but then you don't need a post-workout snack. What you need is a breakfast that incorporates carbs and protein and fluid, right? And so you'd be having breakfast anyway. It's also serving as your post-workout. Same thing if you're working out after work. You probably will need some sort of afternoon snack that's giving you carbs to give you fuel. Maybe you need a protein shake afterwards if it's going to be a while till you have dinner. Maybe you just go ahead and have dinner, right? And you make sure that dinner is one of those balanced meals that's giving you carbs and protein. Because again, I don't want everyone thinking they need to like eat everything they're eating plus start adding a pre and post workout snack, because that's not necessary. And those of you, maybe some of you guys are doing your runs at lunchtime. So maybe you need a mid-morning snack and then lunch is your recovery meal, or vice versa. Maybe you have your lunch and that's your pre-workout, and then you have an afternoon snack that's your post-workout. So if you're able to make your post-workout window correspond with a meal, I have some examples here for breakfast, lunch, dinner. So breakfast could be oatmeal, that's your carbs, with eggs or Greek yogurt, that's your protein. If it's lunch, turkey or tuna sandwich. The turkey or the tuna is your protein, the bread's your carbs. If it's dinner, do a stir fry. The rice or the quinoa is your carbs. The chicken, shrimp, or tofu or salmon or beef, whatever, is your protein. And then you add some veggies for some bonus nutrition. But again, the idea is your post-workout meal should have carbs and protein, but it can just be in your meal. All right. That said, maybe you're exercising after work and dinner isn't for like another 2 or 3 hours or something like that. You're exercising during the afternoon and it's just going to be a while to have a chance to have a real meal. Go ahead and have a recovery snack. Okay. So Greek yogurt, that's your protein with your berries or your favorite fruit, that's your carbs. Cottage cheese with fruit, apple with string cheese or hard-boiled eggs, maybe a mini pita with some turkey slices, maybe some whole grain crackers with tuna. You can do a protein bar shake here. So this is where our Quest bars or similar protein bars would come into play. Maybe your chocolate milk. I really like this Fairlife brand, this ultra filtered. So it's got extra protein in it, but also some carbs. And then you could always do a smoothie where you're blending up some yogurt or protein powder for your protein with fruit for your carbs. So again, definitely lots of options here. I would just make a note if you're not doing dairy, so if you're not doing cow's yogurt or milk, make sure whatever you are doing is a protein source if you're using it that way. So a lot of times our coconut milk and yogurt, our almond milk and yogurt, our cashew milk and yogurt, if you really read the label, you'll see it's very, very low in protein. There are some new products on the market now that are made from pea protein. They actually can have some, a lot more protein than your coconut or cashew or almond options. Even your oat milk, which I know that's pretty trendy right now, only really has a couple grams of protein. So far, far less than your Greek yogurt would. Or your dairy milk would. So just read your labels and make sure you're getting what you think you're getting.
All right, we've got a couple questions here. They're kind of all over the place. Do you want to wait till the end or can you take them now?
So if they're related to this, the fueling, I'd say we go ahead and address them now. If they're more general, we'll try to maybe circle back to them at the end. We can always skip over sections too. The point is to give people what they're interested in, right?
Yeah. So one is, I'm not a runner, but I walk in races. Do I need less carbs than running?
That's such a good question. I'd say really it's based on time. So if you're walking for an hour or less, you definitely don't need to fuel on the walk. If you end up walking like a 10K or half marathon, though, then yeah, you do need to fuel. The same thing would apply. So it's based on time, not on like pace, I guess. And I would still, if walking, especially if it's a hilly walk or you're pushing yourself on it, if that's a workout for you and your fitness level, you still got to fuel. Yeah, you still got to fuel, and you'll still get more out of it doing it in a fueled state.
Cool.
If it's just a leisurely walk, if you're like, heading out to like with your kids or your dog or something, then yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah. All right, next question says, what are your thoughts on caffeine before running / working out? Just to get that extra boost of energy, ?
Great question. Okay. First of all, caffeine it's a stimulant, so it does give you an energy boost. And it's one of the most well-researched and like evidence-based, like successful pre-workout supplement. So it certainly has a positive impact. It's not a substitute for energy from food though. So definitely you can add it. You can have coffee or a caffeine pill or something, or in addition to your pre-workout fuel. Also, individual sensitivity to caffeine varies greatly. So if you know that you tolerate it well, go for it. If you're more sensitive to caffeine and maybe it increases your heart rate and makes the exercise uncomfortable, then you avoid it. But yeah, it certainly is safe for most people. I think the recommendation is maybe 300 milligrams per day. Is safe. Maybe it's 400 milligrams per day. I'd have to look that up to see the exact recommendation, because too much of a good thing is no longer a good thing. But yeah, there's certainly some good research around how it really does help. Lower perceived exertion helps you go faster, helps you go farther.
And last one, do you suggest intermittent fasting while training for a half?
So I don't I don't suggest intermittent fasting. If it's something is working for you, I would definitely say there's ways to do it in a way that's safer and can still support exercise performance fueling for exercise. And it really depends on a lot of different factors, including what you set your window as. I'm assuming you're referring to time restricted feeding, so you have some sort of window that you eat during the day. As long as that window kind of works for your life and you're still getting the nutrients and the calories you need, it's not going to be harmful, and it might be helpful depending on your goals. The thing I would always encourage from a performance nutrition standpoint is making sure that your workout falls in your fed state, your fed window, your feeding window. Not trying to do it, because this is what I usually see, not trying to do your workout in your fasted window. Even if you break it and you recover right after, you actually want to break it before so that you can have a fuel source going into that workout. I feel like this is a big misconception, but again, if you're trying to either build or maintain muscle, if you're trying to maximize your training, and especially if it's half marathon training and those runs are going longer, you really will benefit from having fuel beforehand. So whatever your window is, make sure your exercise falls within the feeding hours.
And all for now.
Yeah. Good. Really good question. I'm glad someone brought that up. Somebody does usually bring up intermittent fasting. So yeah. Then there's some, depending on your goals, again, it's not something I would recommend, but it certainly can work. Depending on your goals, I would just make sure that from an exercise nutrition standpoint that you're fitting that into your fueling hours. Okay. So here's just a recipe, your recovery smoothie. This is just kind of an easy option if, especially now that it's so hot, if you're kind of don't have much of an appetite after you get back from a hot run or maybe a hot bike ride or whatever it is you're doing, and you need to refuel, you also need to rehydrate. This kind of can hit all the points in one, and it's totally customizable too. So you can sub in which elements you want. All right, let's talk about hydration, because we are I don't know if everyone's here in Georgia, but it's summer for everyone. So it's hot probably for most people where they are. And if you're running outside, if you're walking outside, if you're doing any kind of exercise outside, it's even more important to stay on top of your hydration. So why are fluids so important? I would say this even if we weren't talking about exercise, I would say fluids are essential for life. Our body is actually about 50% water. It helps regulate our body temperature. It's needed for all those energy reactions. So everything our body is doing to break down the food we're eating into usable energy requires water. And it maintains proper electrolyte balance in our blood. So we do actually need a very specific balance of fluid, sodium, potassium in our blood for us to function and for us to thrive. And there's lots of other things that we need water for. Remember that it's not just about guzzling water right before we head out for a run or right after a run. Actually, if we're trying to guzzle fluid right before we head out for a run, just like eating too close to running or eating too much fat or fiber too close to running, that's going to cause some GI distress. So we really want to make sure we're staying on top of our hydration in our everyday lives. Once we feel thirsty, it's often a late sign of dehydration. Also, thirst can masquerade as hunger. So we might think that we're hungry, but actually, we'd be better off just drinking a bottle of water, a cup of water. I get asked a lot about how much water to drink. Again, this is often a pretty individualized question or answer, but I would say as a base, most adults should try to get in 8-ounce glasses of water daily. So 64 ounces, which is about 2 liters. So to me, the easiest way to do this is to make sure you have a reusable water bottle that's a liter, which a lot of them are, and just trying to get through 2 of those in the course of the day as sort of your base. And then you want to make sure you're replenishing any fluids that you're losing during your run or during any kind of exercise. It doesn't have to be specific, it doesn't have to be exact, but if you're curious, especially with the longer distance running in the heat, you could weigh yourself before and after, adding in any fluids that you took in during the run. And that's how much fluid you've lost. If you come back from a run and you're 2 pounds lighter on the scale, you haven't burned 2 pounds of fat on that run, but you've lost 2 pounds of fluid. So that's 32 ounces, 16 ounces in a pound, right? So 32 ounces of fluid, a liter of fluid that you need to replenish just to make up for fluid losses on that run, not accounting for what else you're having during the day. So like I mentioned, the 2 liters of the reusable water bottle, yeah, we want mainly to consume water. But really any naturally sugar-free beverages are fine too. If you want to have some decaf iced tea or even caffeinated iced tea, that's fine. As long as it's like, not filled with sugar. And also know that some of your food choices might be contributing to your hydration. So if you're eating a lot of fruits or vegetables, if you're having some soup or smoothies or like yogurt or milk, that's fluids too, right? And then coffee and tea, we used to think that caffeine was like a diuretic, meaning that you lose more fluid from consuming it. But actually, it's very, very mild and doesn't really seem to have that effect. But alcohol does not count towards your fluids. Alcohol is a diuretic. So when you consume alcohol, you have to increase your non-alcohol fluid to make up for those losses. Hopefully y'all like water, but if you find it boring, because sometimes I do too, you can add lemons, you can add some frozen fruit, you can add some lime, some cucumber, some basil, some mint. That'll give your water a little bit of flavor without any added sugar. Sometimes people like to just do like a splash of juice in water or use carbonated water. So there's nothing wrong with carbonated water. You like your LaCroix, your AHA, maybe you have a soda stream. You're still getting your fluids in. Sometimes people need a timer or a reminder app that kind of goes off every hour and make sure that they are hydrating, because when you get busy with work, it can be pretty easy to forget. And just assessing the color of your urine if you are concerned that you might be falling behind on your fluid, or you don't want to like measure it out and make, just look at the color of your urine, make sure it's like a light lemonade color. And that's a good sign that you're doing well on your fluids. Specifically for running, everything we've talked about so far applies. Start hydrated. Don't be going into that run already behind on your fluid and think you're going to be, guzzling a bottle and heading out, because that's going to be very uncomfortable. So really just like the first key to hydrating for running is following those guidelines of like drinking throughout the day. Then in the few hours right before the run, the recommendation would be, again, this is super specific and mathy, but 2 to 4 milliliters per pound of body weight, which translates into 10 to 20 ounces for a 150-pound person. So that's not a lot, just thinking about, okay, in the like few hours before I head out for a run, make sure I'm having a bottle of water, or 2 cups of water pretty much. So this might not apply. If you're only out there for 30 minutes, you actually might be okay with, going without water, having some before, having some after. But if you're out there for 45 minutes, especially in this heat, certainly if you're out there for an hour or more, you're losing a lot of sweat. And so you want to be ideally taking in fluid to kind of keep up with those sweat losses. It's hard to do. It's hard to do, especially with those greater distances and longer durations. But the easiest way to do that is to go out there with some sort of hydration system on you, carrying your own bottle. Maybe it's in a vest, maybe it's around your waist, and just sipping frequently. So like if you don't want to think about the specifics here, which is, having 4 to 6 ounces every 15 minutes, just like, think every 15 minutes having a few sips. And each sip would maybe be about an ounce. The other thing to consider here is that everybody's sweat rate is going to be very different, and the composition of their sweat might be very different. So we're not just losing water in our sweat, we're actually also losing electrolytes, primarily sodium. So that's something we want to think about, which I'll get to in the next slide. But unless you're going to go get a sweat rate test done, so you know exactly how much you're losing and how much of it is water and sodium and potassium, really your best bet is just to, go out there with a bottle and sip every few minutes. Then afterwards, replace those fluids as quickly as you can. Weighing before and after can help you gauge how much, and then continue hydrating so that your urine can remain that nice light lemonade color. So now we kind of get into what we should drink, and this is what I mentioned about when we're sweating. It's not just water we're sweating out, we're also losing sodium, potassium, so electrolytes. For those shorter runs, and maybe when the weather gets cooler, you just want to have water, you just want to have fluids, that is totally fine. Because you're getting enough, most of us are getting enough sodium from our food, frankly, and most of us are getting enough potassium from our food too, for eating fruits and vegetables. Plus, potassium is less of a concern than sodium, but again, most people are getting enough sodium in their diets. Okay, when we need more than water. Okay, if we're going out for a 60-minute or more run because we are training for a half marathon, it's really hot, it's really humid, or we're someone who's a very salty sweater. So we come back from a run and there's like crystallized salt on our skin. We've lost a lot of salt, right? We're someone who's going to want to think about not just water, but also electrolytes, so sodium, and possibly something with carbs, right? Because on those same runs that we're going out and losing a lot of sweat, we're also potentially going past that point where we're going to need to refuel. And that's exactly what these like beverages like Gatorade and Powerade are designed to do. They literally give you water, electrolytes, and carbs. So they're giving you sodium, which is an electrolyte, sugar, which is a carbohydrate, and water. So it's literally designed for athletes. It's designed for runners. So I would not recommend people go ahead and have sugar and sodium outside of endurance exercise. We don't need this literally any other time. And so when we see people guzzling these drinks outside of exercise, it's not good for their health necessarily, but there's a time and a place, and long runs in the heat are the time and the place. So again, anyone training for more than the 5K will potentially want to consider a Gatorade or a Powerade. Then there might be some of us that just want the water and the electrolytes. So we want the water, we want the sodium, we want the potassium, but we don't necessarily need or want the carbs or the sugar. So that could be when you would do the Gatorade or Powerade Zero, when you might dissolve like a noon tablet into your water, or you maybe even do a salt tab. Again, this is really probably more for our half marathon and marathon trainers, but if you don't have a diet that's very high in sodium, you're a very salty sweater, you could potentially want to add some sodium into your fluid on those runs. But yeah, lots of different options for all different sorts of needs. I guess if we're thinking primarily about the 5K, I think we can kind of not worry too much about the middle option there, but we definitely want the water, and we definitely want the water and the electrolytes on a really hot and humid day. All right. And I guess I should just mention dehydration. It can occur more easily than we think, honestly, especially in hot, humid temperatures, which we have here in Georgia in the summer, especially if we're not staying on top of our hydration throughout the day. The symptoms would include feeling dizzy, feeling lightheaded. You can start to get chills. You could start to feel some cognitive impairment, and you start to have some muscle cramps. The definition would be a loss of 2% of your body weight. So if you weigh yourself before and after and you're 150 pounds and you lost 3 pounds of fluid on that run, that's technically dehydration, where you'll start to experience some of these symptoms. Ultimately, it will impair your performance, but it can actually be pretty dangerous as far as compromising your health and safety. So just not to scare you, just to be, aware and be proactive about it. Okay, so we're out of time. I'm not going to go through the next section. I just kind of always, if I had time, I would kind of talk about fueling for running and eating in a way that promotes weight loss aren't the same, and they're not always compatible. So usually I recommend people kind of prioritize one goal or another, whether they're really looking to enhance performance, nail that race, nail that training, nail that race, or whether they're really focused on eating in a calorie deficit and losing body fat. Both can be great goals, and they require sort of different tailored nutrition strategies. And you can achieve both at the same time, but you got to be pretty thoughtful and mindful about how you go about it. So again, not going to go through that today, but if anyone is trying to work on both a fueling goal and a weight management goal at the same time, that might be a good opportunity to work one-on-one with a registered dietitian such as myself. And then some other nutrition considerations for running. Again, I know we're sort of out of time, but antioxidants, calcium, which is important for bone health, iron, which is important for red blood cells, which basically transports oxygen around our body and gives us energy. All right, you'll be getting those slides. You can read those on your own if you're so inclined. But I just want to share my takeaway while being respectful of all of your time. Nutrition is a powerful tool in your training success and your overall health. So when we're trying to optimize our energy, our performance, and our recovery, the first thing we want to think about is like how we started the presentation, planning and eating balanced meals that include all 3 of the macronutrients. So carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, bonus points for vegetables. Time those meals and snacks at regular intervals throughout the day so you can stay energized, you can stay satisfied. Fuel appropriately before and after exercise by maybe planning your pre-run and post-run meals and snacks around it. And if you're doing longer endurance exercise, you're going to want to consider how you fuel during the run as well. We want to prioritize hydration in daily life and during workouts, and really would shift away from this fad diet concept and focus more on, choosing foods that support your health, but that you also enjoy, that fit your lifestyle, that seem sustainable. Think performance, think health, rather than short-term fads. Okay, so thank you. I know we went a little bit over. I will stick around a little bit longer if people have questions I didn't address yet. The questions people asked so far were excellent. And I hope that y'all took away something, whether you try to have a banana before your next run, whether you add a vegetable to your next meal. I hope you walked away with something that you can apply right away.
Yeah, lots of great. Thank you. Great presentation. One quick question that I think we kind of answered for you, but someone asked, is there a timing window to refuel after a run? And someone said within an hour, which is,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I have to say it really does depend on different factors. Like it depends on what you had before. So like if you're well fueled going into the run and the run is short, you might have a little bit more leeway, right? And it depends on the length of the run too, so yeah. But the hour is when your muscles are really primed to absorb the nutrition you give it and really get that recovery process started. The sooner the better.
Any special nutritional needs and things to consider when running while pregnant?
So really running while pregnant is like, this is from a nutrition standpoint and just everything about running while pregnant is like really listening to your body. I would say it just becomes all that more important when you're pregnant to do everything possible to optimize your health, right? So like where an average runner might just like decide to skip the pre-workout fuel or the post-workout fuel and they're like, okay, I'll accept the consequences. Everything matters more when you're pregnant, right? Because you're supporting a whole nother life. So yeah, just kind of like take everything I'm giving you like more seriously, basically. And you have to run based on perceived exertion rather than like the pace you used to hit before you were pregnant, because like oxygen delivery gets changed. So yeah, you might have to slow down. If you're a 10-minute pace, you might have to slow down to a 12. If you're an 8-minute pace, you might have to slow down to a 10. Good substitute if you're not a fruit
What's
person.
a substitute if you're not a fruit person? Good question.
So it depends on when you're having your fruit. From like a fiber and a micronutrient and antioxidant perspective, vegetables. So, like if you don't want to have apple and string cheese for a snack, have carrots and hummus. If you don't want to put like, strawberries on your like yogurt, have spinach in your egg whites. So vegetables are going to substitute for fruit for antioxidants and fiber. But for fuel for running, then you just want to have another source of carb or even sugar, and not vegetables. You don't want to have a vegetable right before a run unless it's like a potato. Sometimes people do like a sweet potato or a white potato before a run. I actually know some runners that do that, but you could have, like pretzels, as carbohydrate. You can have a Cliff Bar. You could have saltines. You could have a toaster waffle. You could have an English muffin. You could have anything with carbs, if you're not into fruit.
I've got a question to piggyback off of the coffee or the caffeine.
Yeah.
Does the creamer in your coffee count as the carbs if you're running first thing in the morning?
It depends how much you use. And actually, like I feel like sometimes creamer has some sugar, but it also has some fat, right? So yeah, it depends how much you use. I would say from a health standpoint to minimize the creamer and then like, have some apricots with it or like have a handful of raisins with it or something. But it's probably better than fasted. It's going to give you a little something. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
I usually do a cup of coffee with a heavy cream pour and then go for a run, but that's not every day. That's just, once or twice a week.
Yeah, I mean, and different work for different people. A lot of times people need their coffee in the morning to, have their digestion finished before they head out on the run. So yeah, you got to figure out what works for you. But I think if you start to increase your distance really beyond like just heading out for an easy 30-minute jog, then the coffee and the cream isn't quite enough. You'll get through it, but you won't perform to your like optimal.
Cool. And if anyone has any questions, shout them out. You don't have to type them. So Any other questions? Lay them on us.
These have been really good. And Jamie, I will send you the slides because I know we didn't get to everything. And some of the slides just had more content that I think people will probably want to look back on. And for those of you based in Georgia, if you do want an individual nutrition consultation, that's something we offer, and it can be done virtually. So yeah, if anyone's training for a longer race or just has other kind of health concerns, they want to address their nutrition with some one-on-one guidance, we can do that.
Well, I think that is it. I don't see any other questions.
Awesome. Thanks again, everyone, for sharing some of your afternoon with me. I hope this was helpful. Jamie, thanks for getting this all organized, and Amy too. I don't think she's on the call anymore, but
Yeah, we love having you. You explain information so simply, and it's super easy to understand. So we'll have you back, and we will send out the deck, everyone, and the recording so you can check out all of this and really take a look at the information after the fact.
and good luck with your training, everyone. Have fun.
All right, bye, everyone.
Bye.